Okay, could you tell us about some of the things that you brought today?
Yes. First is what we call a shadow box, and many individuals will have a shadow box, kind of depicting what their military career, whether it was 2, 3, 4 years or more, or in my case up to 30 years. 30 years you have much more to show in the shadow box than you would obviously if you're just more of a 4 or 5 year veteran. In this shadow box, again, the U.S. flag, and of course I have the flags up here that depict my regimental headquarters that I have, but the U.S. flag that was in the back was given to me on retirement, and that was flown at the regional headquarters in Wichita, Kansas at that time. And in the shadow box I have on the back part, it's able to be seen, again, is the crest, the patch of my regimental unit, and then also all the different unit crests that I served with, or the different units over 30 years. On this side, simply shows a couple different badges, but it depicts when I started out as a second lieutenant and then transgressed 30 years through receiving my last promotion to full colonel in the United States Army Reserves. The bottom portion here shows the different regimental crest or unit insignias that I was affiliated with. The majority of the time I was in the Quartermaster Corps. These other corps represent different times. I started out in the Air Defense Corps, and then I progressed to where I finally was in the Quartermaster, final one. And this final one was then at the regional headquarters when I was promoted to 06 or colonel. Then that's the one that we all wore as senior officers for that particular one. Here are the medals that I received for different accommodations. The highest being the Legion of Merit, which is in the top left-hand corner, and that was on the day of my retirement for 30 years of service, as well as all the different command slots that I had over the 30 years period of time. And these medals are then represented by miniature medals over here, and then they're also represented by the ribbons that are down below it. So kind of depicts a 30-year history of my service to our country, as well as being a veteran in the United States Army.
The smaller ribbons, those would have been worn on your uniform?
The smaller ones would have been worn on my dress, my evening dress uniform. And they can be worn on civilian attire now. It's been that I could wear a suit coat and have those on there. I'm a member of the American Legion, so I could wear it on a Legion coat as well. But generally those were only worn on my dress uniform that we would go to evening activities with. And then the major ones were, they can also be worn, but usually they're not worn outside. They're just for depicting, that you received and so forth, usually in a case of some type. And of course the ribbons, then they are worn all the time on your uniform, your left-hand side. This is a flag from the Iraqi headquarters that was given to me probably around the early 90s. I had a unit that I was responsible for to actually train and I was a battalion commander at this time, and one of my companies was designated to go to Iraq. And during that period of time, this would have been Desert Storm time frame, one of my units, the units were separated out, so we were responsible for training, and of course I didn't personally do all the training. Most of my NCOs were the ones that were truly responsible for this. But one of my captains of the unit that was deployed to Iraq brought this flag back to me and presented to me as I completed my battalion command. And it was a very moving experience, and this was directly taken from one of the flagpoles that was outside the Iraqi headquarters in Baghdad. And always been very special to me is something that he would take the time to bring back, especially for me as his commander in those particular years that we were in Iraq. So this was early on, and so this is an original flag. You can see it's soiled on the left-hand side, and it was taken down. He never did anything with it. He just folded it up and brought it back and gave it to me personally. So very appreciative of that.
All right.
The second artifact that I have brought is a bayonet. Bayonet is attached to the M16, and this was in my early career when I was in Germany, 4 years active duty in Germany, and again, my unit, as I was sent to Germany, was actually going to be sent to Vietnam, but in '72, when I entered, then all units were diverted from Vietnam over to Germany, and then we picked up soldiers coming from Vietnam that were being transported out of Vietnam back to our units to fill up the units. And we were also issued M16. I carried a Colt 45, M1945 caliber pistol as part of the officer weaponry, but we also were issued M16s. And so when we had border patrol, we were also issued bayonets. And of course, this would have been in the early, well, it would have been the mid-70s, early 70s, 73, 72, 73. And so this particular one was given to me by my battalion commander after I served 2 years in his command as a platoon leader and as a captain of one of the platoons, and or captain in one of his companies. And so this was given to his officers that served. So it is a memento for me that it was never used in combat, but it was issued to me as if it needed to be used. And so he issued the bayonet that goes on the M16 that we used during that period of time for all maneuvers and border guard and thing between East Germany and West Germany at that time.
You probably talked about this with Devin, but which base were you stationed at in Germany?
I was stationed at a base, it was Schwabach, Germany, which is just south of Nuremberg, and we were in an air defense battalion. We also served with the 1st Cavalry Unit, and so combined we did border patrol, usually on a 1 to 2 month rotation. So in a year's time, I would spend probably 4 rotations on the border, and usually about 30 days at a time. So, and then we'd come back and we'd be in what we call garrison, or the home base. And yeah, so we got to see a lot of the countryside, did a lot of maneuvers. Of course, that's when we were issued the bayonets and weapons. And fortunately, we never had any problem with that we had to do anything with that or anything. So.
Okay, if you could explain what you've got there.
All right. What I have here is a folder that comes from the National Army of Defense. However, this one here is for that, but all armed forces have these same particular type of folders. And this is a response to whenever an individual is receiving a medal, then usually there's an accommodation. And I show you, this is just an example of the medals that you saw in the shadow box. The top medal that I received, again, upon retirement for 30 years, but also for all the different unit commands and different commands throughout my career, the Legion of Merit. And any medal would have the name of the medal and then the citation. And I just show this as a part of what anyone in the armed forces that receives any medal would have a particular type of presentation done before their unit or group, and then it would be in this format. So, as an officer in the United States Army or any of the branches of the armed forces, you have many different uniforms, and so I brought just a few different uniforms today that you would see me in over my 30 years of time. This is probably the work duty uniform. This was the majority of my Career, I wore this type of uniform. Of course, the rank and your branch that you're in and so forth is depicted on that. Depicted on the uniform. If you have any types of badges and so forth, those can also be placed on the uniform. No ribbons or medals or anything are on the work uniform. And so the uniform that I had prior to this was actually the Vietnam uniform, the olive drab green uniform. And I do not have an example of that. That's one I was not able to keep. But this one here, a good example of the duty uniform throughout probably the majority of my career. Also a majority of it was the Army green, or the Class A uniform. And this is just a coat portion of it. But this would be the uniform that I wore, sometimes for duty, depending on what we were required to do that particular day. Generally to different functions, we would wear the Army dress green uniform, or the Class A's. And again, with the uniform itself, again, you're usually the regiment or the unit that you are with is usually here an officer, an lapel, the rank, and this is my last rank of colonel that is depicted here. Then you have kind of branch insignia that you might be with there, regimental crest, of course, last name, and then on your left hand, above your left hand breast pocket, and then it would be the ribbons that you would have acquired during your period of time. So this would be worn then, could be worn as a duty uniform, usually in garrison, not on any maneuvers or anything like that you would have. The final example is a dress uniform. In today's Army, this is a regular duty uniform that if you're in garrison, you would wear this uniform. During my time in the service, this was our dress uniform, and it's called dress blues, and of course the rank is on the top, and it's very similar to the dress greens. On this particular one, I also have a couple of unit citations. Those were not on the green uniform, but they are on this one here that I was able to wear. The ribbons, and again the rank, or the branch crest, those are all again as would be on the green uniform. So pretty similar, except this was for dress occasions that we wore this that time. As I said earlier, now it's used as a regular duty uniform if you're in garrison or if you're in an office type environment. So,
What do you mean by in garrison?
Garrison means that you would not be out in the field or out on maneuvers or anything like that. It would be where the barracks are at, where your offices are at,
Okay.
things like that, the mortar pools, all the different types of environment. It would be like a post headquarters, environment. So,
If you could tell us a little bit about your hat.
this particular hat goes with the dress blue uniform, but there's exactly the same style of hat that goes with the greens, the green uniform. So only it's green and the same style, and then with the dress blues, this is the hat that goes with that. Now, for a number of years, past number of years, the beret has come in. I have my beret, and I did not bring it today, but the beret took the place of this uniform hat for many years, and now this hat is coming back into style as being worn in place of the beret. So, and the unique thing about this one is that the bill will be a solid black until you are a field grade officer, and then the webbing here or the wreaths are put on it. So you'd have to be a major and higher to have the wreaths on that. Otherwise, captains and below would all just have a black bill like the non-commissioned officers would have, the NCOs and enlisted.